welcome to the SBP podcast, Mobile Filmmaking. I'm your host, Susie Botello, and you are listening to episode 113. Hey, everybody, I'm back here with Jason C. Marshall. Jason, how are you?
I am well, Susie. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this week in a couple days here. After we publish this on Tuesday, we're going to have Thanksgiving, which you in Canada call Boxing Day, right?
No, actually, our Thanksgiving is back in October.
Oh.
And Boxing Day is the day after Christmas.
The day after Christmas. Okay, I am so screwed up on that then. So what is it? The Thanksgiving that you guys have in October? That's a weird time. Do you guys eat turkey and all that too?
Yeah, I mean, it's my understanding is it's basically just the same as American Thanksgiving, just at a different time.
Around Halloween.
Yeah, it's sometime early in October. Honestly, I don't even know what day it is from year to year. Because I don't even know if it's the same day from year to year.
We're talking to a Canadian here.
I just look at my work schedule and the calendar and see whether I have a 5-day week or a 4-day week.
That's funny. Well, that's great. Well, in the theme of Thanksgiving, I wanted to take a moment to thank you for your what you volunteered to share with all our listeners through this podcast, all the techniques and all the wonderful advice and insights into storytelling through film. I really appreciate you doing this, so thank you.
Well, thank you, because you've given me a chance to talk about something I'm passionate about and kind of refine my approach to it. Because this way you and I talk about it. So I'm not in a bubble. You and I talk about it, and sometimes you ask questions to things I've never considered, and that kind of goes into the knowledge bank.
Oh, fantastic! Glad I could help a little, at least. But yeah, I'm learning a lot from you, and I'm sure our listeners are too. So hey, let's get right into it. What have we got? What are we talking about today, Jason?
Well, today we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of kind of the whole process. And we're going to talk about idea versus concept, because it's, well, I think it's something that people don't consider a lot. And I thought about it because over the last couple of years, my friend Julian, who I do most of my work with, he's an idea guy. And every now and then, I'll get a message like, here, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking this, I'm thinking this. And he's just kind of throwing out ideas. But the problem is, an idea isn't a script. An idea is like it's your very first kernel, but to turn the idea into a story, there's a middle step, and that's called concept, which is basically expanding and refining and fine-tuning an idea till it's something more. If that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the things that we studied in school is how to write a treatment.
Right.
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've actually never done it, but I'm familiar with it.
So you have a premise, which is basically, it's your pitch. It's your this is what it's about.
Yes.
And then how you're going to get from that, right? Which is basically an idea, kind of just trying to connect it with what you're saying.
Yeah.
How you're going
absolutely.
to connect that into making it happen, and how you're going to treat the idea to turn it into a film. And it basically does include all, it's part of the before you even get into the pre-production. And it goes all the way through post-production and marketing.
Yep. Actually, you mentioned premise, and that's something I'm not going to get into today. So sometimes debating about idea to concept to premise, but I'm going to hold off on premise till we talk about theme, since theme is essentially that's your deep down. What is your movie about? What message are you trying to convey? What question are you trying to get answered, or trying to answer through your process of writing and filmmaking? So I'm going to hold off on premise until we talk about theme and thematic premise for your project as a whole.
Yeah, and ideas are things that, I mean, you can't really control your brain when it comes to an idea. Uh,
Exactly.
it could be, I mean, part of the idea is your vision for a movie.
Hmm. Absolutely. The yeah. So that I said and just come all the way back to idea. It's as they come in. I'm sure you're aware they're kind of all over the map, because sometimes it's I want to write a comedy, or I want to tell a story about. I'm sorry, my mind just went blank.
The Fast and the Furious, street racing.
Yeah, so I want to tell a story about street racing, but I want to tell a story about street racing isn't a script. So then you take that idea, street racing, and expand it into, well, what if they're street racers, but they're also stealing from truckers? Well, then you've taken your idea and expanded the concept, and that gives you more to work with.
Right. All right. So we wanted to talk about ideas and concepts. And I
Mm-hmm.
know this isn't going to take an entire podcast to do that, but I wanted to share some examples of that, because, like, again, there is not a hard division between the idea and the vision. And I suppose you've had many sit downs with your buddy
Mm-hmm.
Julian, right? Where you're
Yep.
sitting down and you're discussing ideas, and the vision starts to form. In your brain, you start
Mm-hmm.
to see, this movie that he's developing from the idea, but it's still just an idea.
Oh, exactly. Because as I was kind of making my notes for this episode, I was thinking of how our process has evolved over the last. Like, I met Julian back in 2018. We've kind of got to the point where we're pretty much working together almost exclusively, because we've got a very good back and forth. And what happens is, because once again, he's more of an idea man than I am. I'm very much I'm very much a story editor versus an idea guy. So he'll come up with an idea, and then we basically just start a what if, like the what if game. What if this? What if this? What if this? And then when something generates a lot of discussion or conversation, we're like, okay, this goes into the good pile, because it's generating more and more discussion, and it's like, okay, this is good. And then we just kind of go down the rabbit hole and expand and expand and expand until we kind of have the things we'd like to see happen.
I think it would be a good idea, pun intended, I suppose, even though it wasn't. Uh, One of the things that I wanted to discuss here is, I think would be good, would be where ideas come from. Where do they come from? Because ideas can come from experiences. They can come from other people's stories and experiences. They can come from dreams. They
Hmm.
could come from, watching another film. Where does someone where does how does someone identify a good idea, Jason?
Well, if I had the answer to that, I'd be rich. Um, I can Once again, I can only speak from my own experience, because once again, I don't get a lot of ideas, but when I do, they kind of hit out of nowhere, and I would almost describe it as like lightning. Like I'm
Like an
and
epiphany kind of a thing?
Yeah, exactly. Like generally, like if I'm at work and I'm doing drywall taping, which doesn't take a lot of mental energy, it's more more muscle memory.
I'm thinking about the
So
Karate Kid with the.
yeah, it's one of those the few times I can really let my mind wander, and it'll just be this weird connection from something maybe I thought of months ago. It's like, what if this, and then this, and it's like boom, okay, and then I can only describe it as a rush of ideas, all like things all kind of happen at once in a very, very quick succession. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to hop on the phone and send a message to Julian, like, hey, this is what I'm thinking, and then depending on, how, don't, everyone don't tell my boss I don't always put all my mental effort into my work.
I don't think your boss minds because you're still got a job. You're completing your stuff. Yeah.
That's true. But yeah, so then we, then we kind of just bounce messages back and forth through the day. And same thing, I don't know what his process is. He's just like, he just says ideas just come to him. He sends me a message, and then we just start a conversation from there. But it generally all starts from like one kind of idea thing. And like you said, what about a movie about street racers, or a movie about ballerinas, or a movie about submarines, or whatever the case may be.
Oh, I'm probably worse than Julian, because I can come up with a lot of ideas for films. My problem, and maybe this is true with some of our listeners, right, guys, where you say, what do I want to make? What would be a great idea for a film? And all of a sudden, it's like a 10-course meal that just presents itself in front of you. And you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
how do I, hold on a second here. And then you start merging one idea with another.
Yeah.
Like the thing about the street racers. And then maybe you had another idea, where it's mountain climbers, that get stuck on a cliff somewhere. And there's a romance happening, and you're going, oh, maybe I can combine those three things,
Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes doing that is there some sort of exercise or something that you would, I've heard filmmakers saying, they get these ideas while they're trying to go to sleep, or in the middle of the night, or they wake up and start thinking, and they come up with these ideas. And I remember one filmmaker saying, I have a notepad and a pen next to me so that when I wake up in the middle of the night, I can jot it down.
Yeah, I'm always interested to hear how, others tell their story about how their ideas come. Once again, I said, for me specifically, it tends to be, I'm thinking I'm on something else, or I'm thinking of something else, and just some random thing will connect in my brain, and then it hits. I don't remember most of my. I don't think I remember any of my dreams. So the notepad beside the bed doesn't work.
Well, I could tell you, Jason, I've had a few dreams that literally were movies, and one of them I had them. This is a little tidbit for our listeners. I had a dream. This is not that speech, guys. Way, way, way back, many years ago, and I had this one dream. When I woke up from it, it was the beginning, the middle, and the end, and I was watching it like a movie. It literally was an entire movie, and it had this really cool, The Sixth Sense type of an ending that really fit, that really worked. It was like it had all the elements that we've been talking about in this podcast with you, Jason, before I even knew what they were.
Yeah.
And all I have to, and it's still fresh in my mind, all I have to do one day is sit down and write the screenplay.
Right.
I remember every part of it. And I feel like at some point, I'll want to make it. want to make this film.
Mm-hmm.
And but I do feel like, it's really interesting, when you have a dream like that. And I'm sure, I mean, look, if any of you listeners have had that happen, get on social media and tag me and Jason and let us know, because I know it's not very common, but I'm sure there are other people that have had that happen. Has that happened to Julian, do you think, even though it hasn't happened to you?
Uh, I mean,
Julian,
quite
let's get you
possibly.
on.
You should get him on. I do know that he has told me that every now and again, he's like, I dreamt this idea, and then he'll tell me what the idea is. But like I said, he has so many ideas; it's hard for me to keep track of which one came from where. Like I said, look, I am jealous of his ability to just be like, how about this? How about this? How about this? I'm like, I've been trying to come up with one idea for 3 months, man.
Well, that's another way. That's actually another way. Another tactic is, I know in television it happens where the
Mm-hmm.
writers sit down around, on a table, or
Mm-hmm.
conference room or something. Nowadays it's probably Zoom.
Yeah.
And they come up and discuss with ideas for a show or something like that. And they have a bit of a, what is it? A brainstorming session.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's another way to come up with a collaborative idea and bring in insights and expanding on things that maybe just one person by themselves
Mm-hmm.
is not capable of doing. And if you're willing to do that with people who are going to be a part of your team, I think that's a great quote unquote idea to do something like that together, since you're all going to work on the film anyways.
Oh, absolutely. A little story to go with that.
I
There's
love stories.
there's a Julian has had an idea for like kind of just a very basic idea for a story he's wanted to tell forever, but just it hasn't flowed. So one night we went for a drive around the city and stopped at this place called the Lookout. It's basically for
The look in instead of the lookout, like the hotel in The Shining.
oh wow. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh no, wait, it
Or
was
wait,
called the
it's
Overlook.
yes, it's Overlook. Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, this is a spot right along the Ottawa River. There's a parkway that goes along it, and there's a little parking spot, and you can go, and it looks over. It's up on a kind of a cliff. Not cliff isn't the right word, but a huge rise. Looking over the Ottawa River, and you can see Gatineau and all the city lights across the river. And it's always a busy spot. But we drove by one night and stopped, and we just kind of got out, and it was just a really good atmosphere. So we started talking about this idea, and I think just back and forth, we kind of broke the whole story in like a 20 or 40 minute time period for this just a stubborn idea that wouldn't let us take it to concept. But we worked it out. Then he went home and did an outline and like kind of wrote all the stuff down that we talked about. And it's kind of we put it off to the side again because this idea needs time to rest before you come back to it.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that, like a writer's room, it's for me the collaborative aspect makes me more creative. Working in isolation, I am not creative at all.
Interesting. That is interesting, and I think I think you're right with along with a lot of people. I, for me, could spend ever since I was little. I was a bit of a daydreamer, and I could spend hours in front of a window, and then you would ask me, "What are you looking at?" I was like, "I don't know," because my mind was filled with ideas and visions and creativity, really just making up stuff. And I think there are really two kinds of people. Some of them, as far as artists, which is where this creative part of us comes comes from our deep selves, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of it comes from the energy around us and the vibe that we get when we're with other people.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's interesting. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so let's say we've got the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's say when we're talking about the concept,
Mm-hmm.
how does that work?
So, and this is why it was really hard for me to kind of make notes for this conversation you and I are having. Because
I'm loving the fact that you don't have any notes. I can't believe that poor Jason is actually taking all these notes all the time. And it bothers me. It's like he has all this homework and I don't have any. I have maybe 3 words scribbled somewhere and that's it.
um, well, I try to prepare as much as possible, but the thing is, it's this is another aside, is that I have an intent to make videos on my own YouTube channel to kind of go with all these conversations and, kind of put my expertise out there. But I never do it because when it comes to scripting it, I just don't do it. I just find excuses not to do it. But I know this information in my head, and I'm thinking I might try it freeform, where I just start talking and riff and see how that goes. Because writing a script and reading off a script, it feels robotic, and I feel like I lose part of my personality when I do it.
Well, and the other thing too is you have to give. I used to take classes for public speaking and speeches.
Mm-hmm.
You have to read them. And there's a concept of cards, right? Those 3x5 cards. And the reasoning for that is that you're using your brain. And what you're writing down is just a little bit of a guide. So you have to give yourself the freedom to basically be a part of your own conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you just verbalized kind of what was in my head, but I hadn't really identified. But it's like, yeah, it's like reading off a script. Like I've watched the couple videos I've done where I've made a script and it feels very robotic and I don't like it.
Yeah.
Whereas today I'm talking to you and I feel a bit more animated.
Yeah. Well, you're not the first. You should hear my dog.
Anyway, coming back to your question about idea to concept, and the fact that it's depending on what you're writing, the difference can be like razor thin, but just enough to make the difference. Like once again, I mentioned early on, I'm like, I want to write a story, but I want to write a story about a ballet dancer. Well, that's an idea, but there's nothing there. But I want to write a story about a ballet dancer who loses her grip on reality and descends into madness. Well, then you've got a concept, Black Swan.
And the whole story takes place in Brazil or something, right?
Yeah.
You try to answer the who, the what, the when, and the why, right?
Yeah.
In the concept.
Yeah. Exactly. And it comes back to that thing that you and I just talked about, is that how ideas come, they kind of like when something connects, it's once again, the best way I can verbalize it is everything hits at once, like an avalanche, and sorting out the different elements. Like, okay, this goes to concept, this goes to character, this goes to theme, this goes to structure. It's kind of, it can be hard to catalog the individual items,
right?
because of how, if you really hit it, like if you're really onto something, it just pops in your head and you're like, bam, I got this.
Well, it's like that dream I was telling you about. It had all the elements. It was like all the formula, everything there, but I wasn't constructing it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good, I like that. And I'm worried that I'm not. I apologize if I'm not being overly clear on this, because this is something new I stumbled on when I was thinking about, well, structure's one thing, but we got to go back to the beginning for people who don't know how to get to structure. And so this thing, it's a little bit amorphous, and in my head, it's still not. We'll call it 80% clear. I've still got some refining to do on this, but but it's important to talk about it anyway. That idea is one thing, but you need to elevate the idea to really start cooking.
Yeah. I mean, you need to, you can think about how you want to make that cheesecake. Oh man, I love cheesecake.
I'm
Uh,
with you there.
yeah. But then you got to be able to go to the store and shop for the ingredients and know what you got to get.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? That's actually probably a really good. Excuse me.
An
That's
analogy.
yeah. Like, hey, like, okay, I want to cook something. There's your idea, but that doesn't lead to food. So then you're like, well,
Exactly.
okay, well, do you want to make a breakfast, a lunch, a dinner, a dessert, a snack? So yes, okay, well, there you go. So I mean, in its simplest form, your idea is I want to make something to eat, but
And,
that
and
doesn't that doesn't lead to you eating.
and just to re-emphasize for all our listeners, cheesecake is great for breakfast, lunch, dinner,
Lunch and
snack,
dinner.
midnight, whatever.
um, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And this is the value in us riffing back and forth on this is because you just helped me to verbalize something in a more in a simpler form than I was getting at on my own.
Yeah, and I'm trying to do this also. Well, I know it helps you, but I think it helps me, and I think it helps our listeners as well, because it's one thing to touch on something, and then it's another thing to really get a grip on something.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
this is what you're doing for everyone, is because it's very easy to say, well, you have an idea. Well, you develop
Mm-hmm.
that into concept, and people can sort of imagine that, but it's once you start, you say, I'm going to get this idea and I'm going to conceptualize it into a concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then people start going blank. Like,
Yeah,
wait, how
exactly.
do
Well, yeah.
I? Yeah,
What's a concept? How's isn't a concept just an idea? Yeah. So yeah, exactly.
yeah,
You're right. And there is something I try to stay very cognizant of is keeping this information accessible and easy to understand because and apologize I'm going to pre-apologize to any fans of these writers slash authors, but I really don't like Robert McKee. Everyone's like he's great. I'm like, you know what? I've tried to read his book. I couldn't, so I got the audiobook because it's too formal, it's too academic, it's too pompous, quite frankly. It's not accessible to the people it needs to be accessible to. And
this
I
is
don't want
this
to be
is the
there.
thing. This is the thing that we look at when I studied journalism. And I think I mentioned this to you before too.
Hmm.
Um, an adult can read 12-year-old content, right?
Yep.
And understand it. But a 12-year-old, right, cannot read academic adult language, right?
Hmm.
Content and understand it. And so one of the things that I was taught was write it for and it was literally said a 12-year-old, so that a 12
Yes.
year old can understand it. And if they didn't say 8 because you don't want to insult the the educational level of a full grown educated adult, but you also don't want to uh leave out people who maybe they didn't graduate high school,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. They still have a right to be able to read the news and understand it.
Well, absolutely. And the simple fact is that yeah. I mean, this is a bigger conversation for another time for probably another type of podcast. But not graduating high school is not an indicator of lack of intelligence plus or minus. We'll say.
Yeah, and not everybody that's in film has even gone. Some of them have not graduated high school, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But the point is that the audience for this podcast is everybody,
Hmm.
for the most part. So we're trying to bring this to you in a way that's so comprehensive, that, hey, with a smartphone camera. which everybody has, right?
Yeah.
You can understand these concepts, and it doesn't matter what camera that you're using, as long as you have a great story and can make a great film. A lot of times that has nothing to do with the camera. It has to do with
No.
these things that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, exactly. It's the it's funny. I've look at a lot of my stories revolve around my friend Julian because we work together very, very frequently. In fact, when I moved to the city, I found out that he lives like 3 blocks away.
That's funny.
But what it's funny because this is he would often be like, "You got to watch this movie. Here's what happens," and I'm like, "I don't care what happens, and tell me what it's about." And I want to know what the story is. It's like it's about a
It makes
it's
you
about
stop and think, doesn't it? Though.
Yeah, it's like it's about a superhero. I'm like, okay, it's Iron Man and who's the other guy? Captain America fight. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, but what's it about? It's like, oh, it's about fundamental differences in how they see the world. Tell me that, because that's what's going to make me go watch something.
Yeah.
Tell me the meat of the story, and that's what's going to entice me in. I said that story because it was very closely related to something you'd said, but not quite, and I've actually lost my original thought. So I'm going to stop right there.
Okay. Well, look. The concept, right, can be difficult to comprehend when you're sitting down thinking, got to do the concept of this idea. How do I generate that? How do I go from the idea, to the concept? And I was saying before too that it's answering those questions,
Yes.
the 5 W's, right? And that is, the who, the what, the when, the where, and the how, which also happen to be, when I said 5 W's, I go back, I don't know how I remember these things, but it's actually from my classes in college. And a lot of them, have to do with journalism, because journalists, generally, they're telling you stories. They're just factful stories. But they have to answer that, like we were going on the press release with the sheriff, and we had this exercise with Goldilocks and the 3 bears. And the story was, we have to ask the sheriff what happened. So the what? Well, this little girl was lost, and she broke into this house, and who was, and what happened. And we were asking him for all sorts of details he had to share with us, and that was our instructor playing the sheriff for the press release. It was just it was such a great exercise. It was so fun. About the broken chair. And we were treating this like real life news. We were reporters, we were taking notes and trying to get, what we really wanted to do is answer all those 5 W questions. And I think it's the same concept, right? As trying to get to the concept of an idea in order to go from that to a story, and start working on, settle it, because if you can't answer those, then maybe the idea isn't good enough to make a film around it, right?
Well, and that's just it. And that's kind of the whole point of this, is that, not every idea it turns out as a good idea. But if you can elevate it through, whatever your process is, whether it's discussing it with someone else, or just mapping it all out, or just going to sleep and thinking on it, then if you can elevate it, then you're probably onto something.
Yeah, and it's about also, if it piques your own interest as you're developing it from an idea, then most likely you can turn that in a way, as long as you remember how to do that, right? With the rest of these podcasts with Jason, how to develop that interest, right? That interesting, factor into
Mm-hmm.
something that can develop into a full length film that can continue to grip you and captivate your interest.
Well, absolutely. Oh, and I actually, it just popped into my head.
Oh,
Here's a good example. Forever, I've wanted to do a little, a little romantic romance or drama or drum, whatever you want to call it. So,
I
like,
just
there's an
now
idea.
got what that was because I've been listening to that. Yeah.
So that's the first idea. I want to do this within these parameters, but there's not enough there. And then I thought about it. There's 4 seasons in a year. There's 4 parts to your script. I could tell a story of a romance from beginning to end over the course of 4 seasons, and it would follow story structure. So there's my idea to concept.
Mm. I'm thinking of a Keanu Reeves movie that I saw, something about the love letter or something like that.
Is that the lake house where they like the letters went back and forth in time? I've never
Yeah.
actually seen it.
I thought it was a great little story. And Keanu Reeves, I mean, I love the guy. I'd love to meet the guy, but I don't think he's the best actor when it comes to emotions.
No, he's very stolid.
He's very dry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of the film that I was watching. Oh, it's that new one that's out on Netflix, actually, about the he turns his family into robots, basically. Not robots, but he clones them.
Oh yeah, I'm actually very much not up on the new stuff that's on the platforms these days.
So, okay, well, listen. So you got to watch that.
Mm-hmm.
The
I mean,
thing,
you have my interest, that's for sure.
yeah, and unfortunately, so there's a tragedy that happens with his family, which is why he has to clone them. And it just in real life, he's probably not the type. Look, I'm not a screamer myself. Like I won't, even since I was little. Like I didn't see something and just scream at the top of my lungs.
Right.
That scared me. I don't react to tragedy in that way. I think Keanu Reeves is like that times 10.
Right.
So
Yep.
a tragedy happens and it's really hard to see that he feels it because you just don't get that from him.
You know what though?
Yeah.
You can turn that into a strength because that's essentially John Wick.
Well, yeah, but the character was that. And I think in this one, he's supposed to be a dad who just, should be like seriously crying, like seriously freaked out and panicking and all that. And it just doesn't happen. It can be definitely a strength when you're trying to keep your mind, together, which I think is how the director justified it, the lack of it. But anyways, if you haven't seen it, it's a fun film to watch. And why did we get into that? Oh, because of the 4 seasons and that letter.
Yes.
Movie. Yeah.
So that was just okay. What's an example I have of my own of taking an idea to concept, and that's basically it. Because your idea can be about a character or a thing or an event or even a theme. You just need a starting point and then expand it to something that can be a story.
So for a horror film, I told you I was going to go into this a little bit. In The Shining, for example, one of my this was the first horror movie, guys, that I actually sat down and watched, and I was like 12 or 13 years old. And the really cool thing is, and I'm talking about the Stephen King, the original with Jack Nicholson. The really cool thing
Yes. So I want to cut you off because I've seen it, but I haven't seen that one. I saw the TV movie with Steven Weber.
Oh, yeah. No. I saw the latest one too. The
Doctor
making
Sleep.
the after when the little kid grows up and
Yeah,
he's yeah.
I did see that. I very much enjoyed Doctor Sleep.
That one was creepy. That
Mm-hmm.
one was very, very creepy. Um, I got to tell you, that kid that was in that movie is a really good actor.
Very much so.
Um, I mean, like, wow. Anyway, so what was it? Okay, so yeah, you were talking about the seasons. You know,
Yes.
if the setting for The Shining would have been done in the summer, a different season, uh,
Yep.
it would not have been as gripping as it was during the snow with the blizzards and and all of that.
Yes.
And that
Very much.
snow in
Yeah.
that season became a huge part of that story. It was like another character.
Oh, very much. Yeah. It's that oppressive cut off feeling, right?
Yeah. And I mean, like, they were snowed in. Like, remember, the kid has to go and the mom
Mm-hmm.
have to go, Wendy,
Yeah.
Danny. They
Danny.
had to go down the bathroom window. They had to slide. Like, look, it's been decades. So if you haven't watched the movie, sorry about the spoilers. But they had to slide down the snow that was all the way up. Now we're talking about how many stories did that place have? Like 10 stories or something.
Was it
Um,
was it that big?
I mean, it was
Like
like a full
I
on palace hotel type thing.
see. I feel like it was. I want to say longer rather than taller. If that makes sense. Like it covered more area but didn't go too high.
Well, I think it probably, okay, let's say at the most it had 5 stories.
Yeah. Like there were definitely several stories. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're talking about snow here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it covers up your house and then goes up a few stories.
Yeah.
And that's how much snow there was. And so, yeah, they were pretty much stuck. I remember when Halloran, right, the cook,
Mm-hmm.
when
Yep.
he had to open the door to get in, and I think it was getting wedged in the snow or something like that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but anyways, so I read the book years after I watched the film. And I can tell you that story was different from the way that it was
Mm-hmm.
in the movie. And what I find really interesting, and this is something I wanted to, and I warned you about this. Everything that we've been learning from you about story formula and structure and all these things
Mm-hmm.
sort of gets, I mean, a horror film is way more difficult because you have to reveal and conceal at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's true. Once again, so we're on a slightly different page because, like, so once again, I haven't seen the original Shining, but something that's been very popular recently was the Haunting of Hill House, the
Oh,
series on Netflix.
yep.
I've only been through it once, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but it's it did a very good job of setups and payoffs because it showed you things that you needed to know in such a way that you didn't know you were learning them until later when, at the end of the movie, he's like, Dad, the guy fixing the clock. He's like, Son, no one ever came in to fix the clock. And then you realize that these kids have been seeing ghosts their whole lives. But it was the story was crafted in such a way it just looked like people working around this place they were trying to rehabilitate and flip.
Did you ever watch The Others with Nicole Kidman?
I haven't.
Oh,
The truth, I'm not a huge horror fan, which is weird because that seems to be the thing that I make the most.
okay. Here's the thing. So The Others had a really good catch in that sense.
Hmm.
Because
I've read about it. Yes,
okay,
but go
all
on.
right, because
But
I'm
yeah,
about to
okay.
give it away, and I'm sitting
Yeah,
here, my heart is
yeah.
like,
No,
oh.
no.
So basically, they're the ghosts,
Yeah.
and the whole story about seeing the ghosts, like the caretakers, who were taking care of the graves, and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They were thinking everything else is the ghosts that are haunting them.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out they're the
That they're
ghosts in this house, and everybody else is like an intruder ghost,
Mm-hmm.
and they're divided by these two dimensions, sort of speak. But it just becomes it's such a gotcha moment at the end,
Yeah.
when everybody realizes that. But here's the thing. So the stairwell, they have the stairwell scene where she
Mm-hmm.
is walking up and down those stairs from upstairs and downstairs with the little candle and the little candle holder like they did in those
Mm-hmm.
days. And that becomes one of the creepiest. And then they have this music that goes along with it. It becomes one of the creepiest scenes, but it's also a revealing,
Yeah.
So when it comes to horror movies, there's so much psychology that goes into it. It's just like in any other movie, but it's
Absolutely.
twisted. It's just a twisted kind of psychology.
Yeah. It is, but it's also pretty wonderful though. Like that we've talked about this before. That moment, as the audience, when you put it together at the end, that I did see all these hints, and then you're like, oh, I get it, and that wonderful. It's almost the same feeling as when an idea hits you, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh wow, I got it, I get it. It's
It's like a fast rewind in your brain all of a sudden.
And that's a pretty wonderful moment.
It is, and that's also very, very, very hard to do because all the pieces have to fit, just like in any other movie. Like a good mystery is the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think the horror movies though is twisted because it has to really freak you out in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that to you, you could miss things.
Yep.
I'm not talking about just this loud bang and a sound, that comes out, or anything. I'm talking about all these other things, like even with gore, right? You're looking at the gore and you're freaking out. You're already kind of trying not to look and you're missing other things.
Absolutely.
But the director wants you to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like the ones who have really mastered that. Yes, this is a visual medium. I can show you something important in a scene off to the left, but I've crafted this in such a way that you're really paying attention to the right.
Yeah. God,
and
it's
so wonderful.
It's so awesome. There's so many. Look, there are a lot of not so good horror flicks out there.
True.
And yeah, and somehow you're still going, why did I watch that? Like, I can't believe I watched that all the way through the end. I had it in one of our conversations in Clubhouse before you came into Clubhouse with us, Jason. And it was you have to satisfy the audience by giving them, it's like the little mouse thing, a little bit here and take away there and give them a little more. You have to tease the audience along because if there's no teasing, they won't stay with you.
Well, exactly. Well, yeah, because it's a
walk
form
away.
It's a form of engagement because part of when you and I have talked about this, part of the fun is guessing what's going to happen next. So if you don't leave clues, the audience doesn't engage, and it's a far less satisfying experience.
I was trying to remember which cartoon it was where they tie a little piece of cheese into a string, and the cartoon mouse is following it along here and there, and then they stop, and they get to almost get a bite, or maybe get one bite, and then they pull it back again.
Right.
And then they got to get more, and they got to get more. But if they didn't do that, the mouse would go away.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's even though there's still more cheese, there's just a part of that, and that's how our brains work. Like we need that, and you have to kind of please the audience in that way. They
Mm-hmm.
expect you to. They expect you to give them little bits here and little bits there, and they expect you to give it away. And that's part of the journey of what it is to watch a movie, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. And it's mastering subtlety is really, I think, a really good way to put it, because you're right. You got to lay out all this stuff, but in such a way that you're not spoon feeding it to the audience, because when you do that, you give it away and
Yeah.
you end up with an unsatisfying experience.
The
So
roller
it's,
coaster is another
yeah.
great example.
Yes.
They're giving you these little weeps and little dips
Yep.
and things like that, and then you get the drop off. And you're thinking, okay, that's done, but no, we're getting some more dips and then another drop off, and your anticipation for the other drop off, is
Mm-hmm.
is what keeps those dips kind of cool. Otherwise, they're boring.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jason, I think we did it.
I think so.
I
I
think
hope
we've
we
strung our audience through
strung them along.
yeah, through the concept of the idea and concept, I should say.
Yep.
What
I think
else?
so.
What else do you think that we may have missed that you'd want to bring up?
I think we've covered, 'cause like I said, there's the conversation about premise, but we're gonna talk about that once we get to theme.
Yeah.
Which isn't gonna be for a little bit yet. So we're gonna have a couple conversations about character next, because I want to initially I'd put character after structure, but I found there's a better approach to that, and we're gonna bump character up to like the second thing to consider after you have an idea and a concept. So we're going to talk about,
That makes sense.
yeah. So we're going to talk about. There's a couple different things we're going to talk about. Character arc, obviously being one of them, but we're going to get a little more nitty gritty and down and think about things like backstory, because you need to know. For example, character arc is want versus need, internal versus external conflict, but they can't have an external conflict unless they have some trauma. So you need to think of backstory. So yeah, there's a number of things we're gonna discuss. So we're gonna spend I would imagine probably 2 episodes on character, just to make it
And
digestible.
the development of your protagonists as the
Yes.
characters to the story, because you and I would approach something completely different than someone else.
Yes.
A firefighter goes right into a fire with in it from a different angle than the lifeguard for the swimming pool.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
So yeah.
And then yes, and then after character, we're gonna talk about theme. Then we're gonna hit structure. You're gonna hit the ground running on that.
Actually, it would be good conflict to see how those two would combine, the lifeguard and the firefighter. um,
That's your
okay.
new buddy. That's your new buddy cop movie.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. This sounds great. Everybody, I want to wish you, if you celebrate it, a very happy Thanksgiving holiday, however you celebrate it. And for Jason and your family, even though you've already had it, thank you very much, and happy Thanksgiving to you too. You want to say
Well,
goodbye
thank
to
you.
our listeners?
I do. Thanks for. I guess thanks for continuing to engage as Susie shifted gears a little bit and started talking more about story, because you've given me a chance to share some stuff. And I guess the only thing I want to throw out there is, you mentioned this earlier, Susie, is tell us how your ideas hit, how they come to you. Just hit us up on the Twitter and the Instagram and tag us and be like, hey, I get my inspiration from here, or my ideas come this way, because I'm very curious to hear other people's stories.
Oh, I am too. It's one of the reasons I love hosting the podcast, is to hear from all the filmmakers out there. By the way, guys, you can follow the podcast at SBP Podcast on Twitter and on Facebook, at Mobile Film SD on Instagram. And then you can follow Jason.
Yes, on Instagram at Jason C. Marshall. And on Twitter at Jason Marshall CA, because someone else has the handle I want and I can't get it.
Great. All right. Thank you, everybody. Say good night, Jason. Or say
Good
goodbye.
night, Jason. Goodbye.